Hello everybody. This video is going to be slightly different from some of my previous videos where I've concentrated on actual gear such as cameras, camera bodies and lenses and sort of anything associated with that. The reason for this video is because I had a request from a YouTube user and they asked me, well, how do I get, my images are looking like the way they do from the Panasonic LX100. Now I responded and I said, well, look, I'm editing, I'm shooting in RAW and then I am editing my images. That's a funny one. Anyway, yeah, so I thought, well, why not create a video on my process, and essentially all I'm saying is this is how I get or portray my artistic vision from the images that I take. Now it might not be what you're looking for, so you might not like what you see, that's your subjective opinion, and I've editing mine like how I wish and making them look how I want. Anyway, without waffling on, I just want to say this is also not going to be a Lightroom video where I cover the how to use Lightroom, because we're going to be here for hours. You're not going to enjoy the video. It's not what I'm about. I should say though, I used a gentleman, well, I say gentleman, sorry, this was the YouTube user who actually asked me the question. Again, no affiliation, is they asked me the question. So Anthony Morganti, this person, they've got a whole host of tutorials on their YouTube page, and they're all free, and they're actually, well, I found them to be extremely good because I went through the Lightroom tutorials. So again, if you do use the tutorials, I'd sort of say like, comment, subscribe. It will help their channel grow, and they're spending a lot of time giving you content, and again, this is my way. I've subscribed, I've said thank you. It's my small way of saying thanks. Anyway, let's get on with the actual video now. Okay, so your first question might be, well, how on earth did I get these images into Lightroom? Now again, this is not going to be a sort of complete walkthrough of Lightroom, but I went to File, I went to Import Photos and Videos, selected my SD card when I took the actual images on my LX100, and I just imported the photos. And they went into the Lightroom library. So this is my library here. So I've got a folder here called South Bank 2018, and I took these images on the LX100, as you can see here. Yeah, and I live in London, so that's why South Bank. And also, if you do hear noises in the background, unfortunately, one of the downsides of living in London, it's extremely noisy. And there you go, that's an ambulance, police or fire engine in the background. Anyway, so I've got a couple of folders, or a few folders in here where I know I've got images from the LX100, and I know there's a host of images which I've never touched because I've never had the time. So let's select an image from here. So actually, if I show you this image here, which is, again, it's one of my most favorite images. This is currently you're viewing it with all the changes applied. I'm just gonna take it to the develop module. This is where all the editing happens, inside the develop module, and I'm just gonna, you can see down here I'm just going to actually see, I've early days I was experimenting a lot, so there was a lot of learning that I did. Anyway, you can see when I actually imported this, so well over a year ago. I'm just going to select the first, and what this is going to do, so this is what my image looked like straight out of camera. You can see it's a lot different to that. Oh, well, not there. It's a lot different to what you're looking at now. No, there wasn't any sort of real magic in here. It's just essentially sliders here that I've changed. Before I walk you through an actual image that's not been edited, I'm just going to mention and say, like, look, if you don't yet understand fully what white balance, color temperatures, exposure, which is a very important one, or what your highlights and shadows are, I'd really recommend you sort of learn what these elements do and how they affect your images. You'll find if you do understand how these work, you'll get an image a lot closer to what you're looking for straight out of camera, rather than having to go through this actual editing process. Now, a lot of this, if I had sort of knew this early on, I would have made adjustments in my camera, so I knew that the JPEG images that I then want are going to be a lot closer. The JPEG images that I'm looking for, that would have been a lot closer to this, rather than looking like that. Now, for some, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and in certain situations, for me, that image is absolutely fine. However, going through my editing process, I liked this particular look when it takes effect. Yeah, you do need a fairly decent spec machine to do all this Lightroom stuff. All right, I'm just having a look here to see or find an image that I've not yet edited. Anything with a symbol like that, you can see it says photo has develop adjustment. So develop, that's the develop module. And I'm going to select an image that, let's take this one here. So this is an image that has not had any changes made to it as of yet. And if I just flick back to the library module, I'll just show you again, that's the Panasonic LX100 without flash, ISO 500, f1.7. So there you go. Those are the settings on the camera at the time. And I'm going to hit the develop button and I'm going to start editing my image. Okay, so now that we're inside the develop module, you can see that if we look in the history, there's nothing there. So the history will keep a record of any changes that you've made, so you can go back a step and undo what you've done and sort of use it to essentially compare your before and after. There is actually another way to compare as well, before and after. Unfortunately, I can't remember the shortcut keys for it, but again, if you're going to be using Lightroom heavily, I suggest you learn. Can make a huge difference. Anyway, so the way I do this, and again, I don't know whether there's a wrong or right way to, or wrong or right process of editing images within Lightroom. I just follow this method and it seems to work for me. Now, if somebody's going to leave comments and say, well, that's completely wrong, by all means do so. Just let me know why it's wrong. I'd like to sort of, learn and get better at Lightroom if something I'm doing is incorrect. Now, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Anyway, so I tend to start off with my highlights. So highlights are whites, which are sort of overexposed and there's no detail in them. It's pure white. There's no detail. I'm going to lower those, and you can see here that I'm ever so slightly clipping the highlights, and I'm also actually clipping some shadows. And you can see as I sort of take my cursor over them, you can see this red that's appeared in certain areas. That's letting me know that these areas are overexposed. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lower this slider, and you can see that just now disappeared, which is telling me that there might not be any real detail there. It's a reflection, but it's not overexposed. I'm just going to lower that a little more just for my liking. Next, what I'm going to do is my shadows, and I'm just going to actually increase them, because you can see here and here and possibly here very, very little detail. Now this is probably not the best image to demonstrate this, but let's see. I know I've you know, I'm clipping my shadows here a little as well. You can see down here it's still, you know, pure black. Let's see what that does. All right, that's not too bad, but that looks, you know, a fair bit different compared to that. So there we go, that's looking a bit better. Next, I'm just gonna lower my whites a little, because again, I can see that this side of the image, you know, has a lot of whites in there that I don't need. Well, I don't sort of specifically like. I think that's looking good. I'm gonna leave the blacks as they are. Now texture, this is a new feature introduced I believe around a month ago, mainly for skin tone, so I'm going to leave that completely. Clarity, I like to just add a bit of clarity to my images. It sort of gives it a kind of sharpness to it without, I'm not sure exactly how it works. Again, I'm no expert, but again, I like the look, and I like where it's at the moment. Next thing I'm gonna just turn up the vibrance a little. Just going to intensify the colors that are already there. I think that looks good to me. Just gonna play around with the contrast to see whether I can. I've just double clicked there and that's reset. And again, if you make changes, you can double click any one of these to reset it back to its default value. Just gonna take this dropper and just gonna see whether if I make a change to the white balance, right, that's a bit, bit too warm for my liking. I'm just gonna hit Control Z, which is gonna undo. I'm just going to select a slightly more grey. I don't have much grey on this image. I'm just going to select here. I think that looks a bit better. It's just slightly warmed up, but there we go. Remove any chromatic abbreviation. And I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to next up crop the image. Now, because I mostly publish on online, I sort of tend to always just go with 16:9 ratio, and this is already in 16:9. Okay, that's handy. And I'm just gonna I want, you know, people to concentrate on this meat that's here. I'm not going to put it dead center. This leaf is a little off-putting. I think if we did that, I'm just going to hit enter. So for me, that looks like how I want to make the image look, so I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm just going to take you through another image, again one that's not been edited in any way. Let's take one of these out, images that have been taken outdoors. To think of it, I don't actually like the angle of that. If I was a bit lower when I took the image, I think that would have looked a lot better. So I'm going to just select another image to take you through. Let's go back to our library. I'm going to find a different image. So let's select just going to check what these were taken on. This is actually GX80, so I'm going to skip that. London Bridge. Oh, that's me office. Okay, so this was taken in and around London Bridge. This is actually Bank. Let's find an image. Strange, it's telling me none of these images have been edited. Oh well, I didn't think that was the case. Okay, but let me just go back to the develop module. Okay, so it's telling me none of these images have been edited. I'm sure I did at some point. Maybe something happened, but anyway, I'm going to select. I'm going to take an image of the bridge. Oh my! What's going on? Oh yeah, let's do that. So again, this image, I believe it was quite a long exposure. Yep, so this image, 4-second exposure at f4, and I'm pretty certain it was the LX100. Just going to double check it. It was actually the LX100, ISO 100. So go back to the develop module, and we're going to edit this. Now I can instantly see that, you know, I've got a lot of highlights here that are just way too overblown. Now chances are I'm not going to recover any detail there because, you know, my original image, I've got no detail there to recover. But what we can do, we'll be able to sort of, you know, bring these highlights down a little, increase the shadow so that we can just see a bit more here under the bridge. You know, and we'll see whether we can just change the color temperature to make it look a bit more appealing. I'm not saying that this is, you know, there's anything wrong with that. To a lot of people, and to me actually, other than the highlights, the image actually looks pretty decent. So anyway, first of all, I'm just going to lower my highlights, and I'm going to lower these whites as well, which it's quite, yeah, I've sort of seriously overexposed these whites here, but anyway, it is what it is. I'm going to increase the shadows a fair bit, so you can see we've got, you know, a fair bit of detail back from here. Now I should have probably shot this at ISO 200 rather than 100, because when you go below the native ISO on Panasonic cameras, as far as I'm aware, it's actually ISO 200 on Micro Four Thirds. You do lose dynamic range. Now again, it was something that I wasn't aware of until sort of far later. Again, you know, we'll deal with what we have. So I'm just going to increase some of these blacks a little. Exposure. No. Just double click that. No, I'm just going to lower the exposure a little. Increase contrast a bit. Okay, that's looking a lot better to me. See if we can get a bit more out of these shadows here. You know, there's a tiny bit there which we've done. Just increase some of these blacks. I'm just going to lower the whites in the image, and again lower the highlights. Now white balance, this is partially grey, so that will be a good test. I'm not sure whether, I'm just going to do a comparison. So undo that. So that's a bit more warm. It's a bit more cool looking here. I do prefer, actually I prefer this, though I think the actual conditions and, you know, what I physically saw with my eyes was a sort of it was a sort of in between. So let's just see what's happened here in terms of the white balance. So it's gone from 4100, and it's gone to 3650 now. I'm just gonna increase that. I'm just gonna move that to 3800. I think that we're sort of about there, and for me that's yeah, it's about there. Just gonna add some clarity again. It's this kind of sharpness that's applied to the image. I do like that, and I'm gonna add a bit of vibrance. Okay, am I going to crop it? I'm just going to have a play around with the crops to see. Okay, it's again saying it. I've got this part in the image here, which is I just want that to be in the center. I think that's looking a lot better. We don't have that little bit we had, which was a bit irritating and took focus away. Just going to see if we can, what correction, auto correction would do. Doesn't seem to have made any real change, so we're just going to leave that off. There's a few stars up there. We'll leave them as they are. I'm happy with that. You know, that's it. And my next step will be to select you know, a range of images or all the images and go to File, Export, and I'll export them as JPEGs and then pop them online. That in a nutshell is my editing process. I don't put these then into Photoshop or anything further. That's it for me. You know, some might say, well, for what you do, you don't need to Lightroom. You know, that's probably very true. You know, I'm spending money on, well, actually, I'm not spending money. I get it through work, but there we are. That's my editing process. Look, I hope you've found the video useful. If you've spotted something that I've done that you know is incorrect or I shouldn't have done, it'll be good if you can sort of point it out to me and sort of explain why I shouldn't have done this, or you know, why I should have done it a different way. It'll help me to sort of better my images. Again, if you've got other questions, feel free to ask, and yeah, until next time, ta-ra.